think without question is the payout rate. So what are we really talking about here? A pension plan is basically a pool of dollars that you have there's an obligation to make a payment to you. And if you like to think of that, but this payment really being in the form of some type of a life annuity, whether it's for a single person, if you have a spouse, you're usually making an election for money, a certain percentage to continue to you, and then a percentage then to continue to your surviving spouse, whether it's 100% of that payout or 75% or 50%. But what we really want to do is let's simplify this, right?
Sure.
Which is to say, if you were to take that monthly distribution you're being offered, you multiply it by 12. That really tells you what your annual payout rate is. If you divide that by the lump sum that you're being offered as a buyout offer to get rid of that pension, that'll give you what we call the payout rate. And usually our rule of thumb basically is that 7% is really the break-even percentage. If it's less than 7%,
definitely might want to that's a potential reason to consider taking the lump sum.
And if it's over 7%,
that might be a serious reason to say, hey, this is a good deal.
Yes. So, but there are some other factors, right?
Absolutely. One of which is pretty important is your health, your longevity, or your spouse's longevity, because really what happens is, just like with an annuity, these pensions, if you're a single person, they end when you pass away. You don't pass on any of that asset that was creating the income stream to any surviving heirs. And if you have a spouse, well, that might continue for your spouse, but then it then again also is gone once your spouse passes away. So if you are potentially in not great of health or don't have a history of longevity in your family, then you're not going to be receiving that payout for a very long time.
Yes, and that really kind of brings us to the other point, which is how important is it to you to pass that capital on to your heirs? Because we know that these pension accounts or payouts are basically immediate annuities.
Right.
It starts immediately when you make the election, and then it stops at your death. So that capital is retained, if there is any, by the pension plan. They've absorbed the obligation. So that's kind of an important consideration. Is it important to pass on this capital? Do you want to even have the opportunity
to pass it on to someone? Exactly.
And then obviously in many cases, then the last factor is, do you need the money, right?
Right. Or also, not only do you need the money, but do you want the security of having that cash flow every single month, just like a Social Security check? Is that something that's of high value to you?
Right, because we know that in working with folks for many years is that the confidence in a financially secure retirement really starts with their confidence in cash flow. The confidence that money will be there. And, we see folks every week, and it isn't unusual for someone to look at us, as we had some folks yesterday that while you were in a meeting with some folks about Medicare, and I was talking to folks, and they go, how does this really work? I mean, let's assume I move my assets to your broker-dealer, right? I do that IRA, I do that rollover for my 401k. What happens then?
What's next?
What's next? Well, what happens is, again, we would establish a ACH, automatic distribution, that would go to your check, if you need the money, to your checking account once a month. We withhold taxes, etc., just like they do with your direct deposit now.
Just like with the check, with your monthly check from work.
Exactly. So,
but it's even cooler because you get to pick the day
and the amount and the withholding, and you can change it whenever you want.
That is also true.
Don't have to go talk to that mean old HR lady
or gentleman
or gentleman to make those changes.
Exactly.
In either cases, you're having more control over your situation, which is good. But, again, what happens is that it's a routine that you create, and having that confidence. And for many folks, I mean, I can tell you I'll bet it's 80+%. Having that confidence that we're actually going to be able to deliver that income is going to be sustainable and continuing. That's a big hurdle for them. I mean, it's a big leap of faith. It's I don't want to call it a fear factor, but it is.
Well, you're going into the unknown because you knew that if you got up, went to work every day, you
believed your employer was going to deposit that money.
Exactly. And if you continued to work, they were going to continue to deposit it. But once you leave your employer, now it's based on all of the hard work that you did leading up to that, all the saving, saying now I have to live off of what I saved for myself in retirement. But I think you also made another good point about the level of cash flow or the being able to control your cash flow, and that's another reason why people may or may not elect the pension buyout option, because if they find that their other fixed income already creates enough income for them in retirement, they may not need the full amount of their pension.
And that's like rule number 1, right?
Exactly. Don't take money you don't need.
Right. Never pay taxes on money you're not using. Exactly.
So that might be a reason why, hey, if you don't necessarily need that higher payout and you want to have access to that capital that is available to you.
Nice segue.
Why, thank you.
Let's talk about Joe and Sally.
Joe and Sally?
Yeah, Joe and Sally, number 44.
Okay.
Okay. Joe happens to work for one of those companies where we happen to have a lot of clients.
Shocking.
Phillips Petroleum.
Nice.
Folks over at Phillips in South Roxanne. I know that they've recently received an offer from Shell to take a lump sum distribution for their pension plans.
That's right. And for Joe, his was $70,000.
That's right. So, what's important here is let's kind of set this up a little bit. Joe's currently, he's just recently retired, all happy as pie. And somehow his wonderful wife, Sally, he's talked her into keeping on working because she still has some tread left on the tires. So in their particular case, with her income, he also has 2 pensions. One's from Shell and one's from Phillips. The Phillips pension, large enough between those two that basically that and her income, they don't really need any cash flow. So he now has an offer to say, hey, should I take this as a lump sum?
Right.
Or start it really in December? So what were we discussing before? He doesn't need the money. That might be one reason why he wouldn't start the pension plan today.
Sure.
But let's talk a little bit about let's go into their fact situation because I think it's kind of fun. Again, they were offered a lump sum distribution of approximately $70,000, but they were also offered as one of their options was a joint and survivor annuity.
75% to the survivor.
Right. So let's give you some easy numbers. What happened was that Joe was offered $337 per month.
And
which is $4,044 per year.
Exactly. And Sally would be offered $253 per month, which is about $3,000 per year. Right.
So let's kind of analyze this from the money point of view. That $4,044 pension that he would, or annualized pension he would be receiving, is actually equal to 5.7% of that $70,000.
Right.
So during Joe's life, it's really a low payout rate, right?
It is a low payout rate because if we remember, we talked about 7% really being that break point for what would be considered a pretty good payout rate. But then if we looked at Sally's case where she had $253 per month, which is
because it dropped down.
Exactly, because it went to 75% was the survivor benefit if Joe was to predecease Sally. $3,036 per year, and if we took that $70,000 and if we took the $3,000 divided by the $70,000, that's only a 4.3% payout rate.
So it's much lower. So even blended, if you want to blend them, you can go, okay, well, really, that's about 5%.
So we're looking at a lower payout rate.
Right. But you know what? That might not matter.
Right. It's just one factor in considering if you want to take the pension election or
not. When I was visiting with Joe and Sally, one of the things, again, they were concerned about is
cash flow.
Is that it wasn't that the cash flow, it was really the certainty of that cash flow.
Right.
So for them, it might be, you know what, maybe we're going to take this payout rate, pay taxes on the money. We really don't need it. But at this point, take that money out and take that income stream, and that's fine. But the payout is low. Sure.
And also we talked about how they don't necessarily need this income to make their game plan work, but an extra $250, $300 a month might pay an extra bill for them or be some fun money.
And, $70,000 isn't a small amount.
No.
But again, there is a consideration of whether they want the opportunity, the chance, if you want to think of it that way, the chance to be able to pass all, if not part of this $70,000 on to their children after they're both gone, because if they do elect they do elect this joint survivor payout.
That $70,000 is retained by Shell, the pension company Shell uses, and they receive that $300+ per month. And then once Sally passes away, it's gone.
That's right. So the burning question is,
what did they do?
We don't know.
They haven't decided yet.
Well, it's interesting because
this is an ongoing case.
Yeah, what happens is in this particular case, getting getting this, we know that the participants are offered basically 45 to 60 days
To make their
to
decision.
make a decision. So I'm sure